a sermon by someone talking about rest. And they used Genesis 2, 1 through 3. And I found that very, very interesting, which is when God rested from creation.
Yeah.
And just because we've had this conversation back and forth about Sabbath is we don't need the Sabbath and stuff like that. But what I loved about his thing is that he was in agreement with you. At the same time, still recognizing that we do need a rest, but also saying like we need, like Jesus did it. He's the one that he did everything. We don't need to rely on ourselves. We don't need to rely on ourselves to rest. That our rest is in Jesus. Like we should be resting on him and go on Sundays, like dedicate that time to him and recognize. Like he said Sunday because that's when we go to church, right?
Sure, that's our as a Protestant Sabbath.
Exactly. Yes. So, he also mentioned that in Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3, could have actually been part of chapter 1. Not in that the Bible is wrong, but
the Bible doesn't have chapters.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what he said.
Genesis is just the book of Genesis.
Exactly. So. It says, so the heavens and the earth and everything in them were completed. On the seventh day, God had completed his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, for on it he rested and from all his work. On it he rested from all his work of creation. So, he brought up a few points of like he blessed something that isn't tangible, right? Why would he do that? Because it blesses us, you know? But yeah, I just thought it was an amazing point of just being like relying on the Lord and committing to resting on him. He said that in Psalm 127, I don't remember which, it was either 122 or 127. It says that God doesn't sleep, right? Where we think, the point is that we have to rest. He is the example of rest, right? Where we think resting is either watching TV or sleeping. And that's why he pointed out, like in Psalm, one of the hundreds of 20 in the 20s, 120s, that God says that he doesn't sleep.
Right.
So his example of rest is not something
that we can follow.
No, it is something we can follow, but it isn't what we think it is. Obviously, we can't not sleep.
Yeah.
But resting in him, that's how we can follow it, because we're resting in him, you know? So yeah, what do you think about that? Yeah,
for sure. Like we talked about before, I think I agree that like what I'm saying is we're not under the law anymore.
Right.
So we're not under the Sabbath anymore.
Right.
So that's why we don't follow the Friday to Saturday night Sabbath, right? Although I believe that resting is a good thing. That's why I put it into my work schedule, right? I work for myself. I could work 24 hours a day, right? I could.
Yeah.
But I choose to work a specific set of hours a day so that I can rest throughout my work day. So that during that, 8-hour period or whatever, I have rest built into that, right?
What does rest look like?
Rest for me just looks like I'm not engaging in like heavy workload, right? And again, that is a part of it is what I'm saying. But like what you're saying, I agree. There is times when we need to rest in God. Right, this is what we're doing now. Like this for us is like we do this not only because we want it to be a YouTube channel, not only because we want it to be part of our business, but
because we want to help people love the word.
Right, but this is also just time for me and you to sit down and talk through this stuff, right? Because it helps you to have your tank filled up. It helps me to kind of get some of these ideas and talk through things with you, which I really appreciate. And for us to be able to share those ideas with others, which I think is very healthy, right? So for us, this is a form of Sabbath that I would say, like, while it is a portion of work, right? This portion of us actually sitting down and talking is not necessarily like that work time, right? At least in my mind. And maybe other people would be like, wow, that doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Like for us, that's how I feel about it. And other times like this, because we do this off camera too, not necessarily in this format or this, but this we'll official, right? Yeah. But we'll talk through things and have discussions in that way. And I think for us, like that is us not only having a discussion with each other, but also listening to the Father and hearing, well, what does my wife say about this? How does my God speak through that? And how do we connect to that, right? And so I think that's really, really important for sure. Yeah. I just don't think that we're underneath a law that puts us into that. You understand?
Sure.
Yeah.
But the reason why I connected it to what you were saying is because it says in your it says in that Revelation verse that we are to be reliant on the Lord, and even in rest we need to be reliant on the Lord, because we don't know how to rest correctly. And we can't rest correctly because our mind is always going, because we are broken, because during the fall, that's one of the things that happened, right? Like another point that he said is that when man was created, so in Jewish times, it's still, the day begins at evening, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. At dusk. Yeah. That's when the day begins. So on the sixth day, he created man. And then the first day after they were created was the Sabbath. So the first thing that they experienced was rest, was God's rest, in that example, of seeing that example. And then the fall happened, and it's kind of like, not that work is bad. Work is not bad, because we were still supposed to multiply. What's it called? Be fruitful and multiply. Like that was a thing before the fall happened. So, yeah. So anyway, I related it back to that, because we just have to be so reliant on God, and we can't just always be self-sufficient. And what was the word that I said that I looked up because I couldn't remember? And then
autonomous.
Yeah. We can't just be reliant on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think? You're obviously thinking.
What do you think? Your brain is obviously working.
I didn't mean it that way. I could see your face is thinking specifically.
No, not really. But obviously, God's example of rest is a huge thing. Like I said, that's why we need to build it into our lives in any way that we can. Yeah. And that's why we do everything, like we talk about all the time on this podcast, like we do everything in accordance to God. So, like, we don't give him just a piece of us. Like, that rest that we have with God is not the only time we spend with God.
Right.
Right? And any rest that we have should be spent with God, you know? And that doesn't look like we study the Bible. It doesn't look like we worship. It doesn't look like any specific way. It's that we are resting in him and we're allowing him to fill us up, right? Because there's not a prescribed thing for that.
Right.
There's not.
There is not legalistic. It's not a religious thing. It's just resting in him.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it can't be.
I know, that's what I was going to say. Like, it can be. But for me, I like to take my Saturdays, not touch my phone, and just spend time reading the Bible and praying and going to somewhere outside, because I love the wilderness and I love seeing the nature, because I can see God in it, and that's rest for me. Right. You know? But it may not be rest for everybody.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely not. Like, that to me is a hindrance to my
you don't like
mental
outside?
Capability. Well, it's just like I have a different view of how I rest, right?
How
and for me, rest equals like creation. It equals looking at these things. It equals looking at my YouTube analytics and like figuring out things. Like, for me, that is a piece of where I feel comfortable.
How do you rest?
That is part of rest. That's what I'm saying. Like, for me.
Yeah. But describe it. Like I just did. I go outside.
I did. Oh, okay. I said creation. It looks like me creating things, or researching to create things, or wanting to drive in that way, right? Writing music, or creating a video, or whatever else. Like, all of that to me, like coming up with ideas. Like, that to me is resting in what God has given me, right? And so, I don't know, that's how I see it. And I it's not like a, like I said, it's not a legalistic thing. It's not a pre-scheduled thing. It's not a Saturday thing for me. It's an everyday, like, just throughout my day, I feel like I rest with God, and I hear him, and he talks to me, and I have these ideas, and I just, like, that's how it is for me, you know? And for some people, it may need to be prescribed, right? For some people, so like, let's say you've got 7 kids and like you don't have time to do anything, right?
Why 7?
Well, I'm just saying a busy person, right? In America, like even if you have 2 kids, your life is crazy, right? Like you're going all over the place. You're going to school things. Like you've got a wife and kids and a dog and a cat and all this stuff that you've got to take care of. Like if you're living in that life, then you may have to prescribe time for yourself in order to keep that schedule.
Like
in order to make sure that it's something that you are actually doing. For me, it's become very easy in the job that I have now, right? Because I control all of my time.
What about in the job before?
Well, that was a very loose job as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a 9 to 5. I've never had a 9 to 5. I've always been in some sort of weird job or in school or whatever, right? So like I've been in ministry, which is not a 9 to 5 job. And in my situation, I didn't have like an office where I went in and I did all this stuff. It was hard. You did have an office. I'm saying I didn't have to like go in all the time and like do a desk job all the time, right? There was a portion of that, right? A portion of creating videos for the church, a portion of scheduling people, a portion of people management, right? A portion of actually doing music or writing music or scheduling stuff or whatever, right? Like yes, my time was taken up, but it was never like a demanding job like that, right? So I always had time to add in meeting with someone for lunch or doing these other things that would allow me to rest and allow me to live not under the burden of work, right?
Of a schedule.
So yeah. So anyway, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like Sabbath is important, but I don't think it's prescribed to us in the way that we see Jews doing it today.
Yeah.
Right?
He clearly said in Mark 2, then he told them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Right.
So then the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. Yeah,
and then we also see Paul later talking in the New Testament about how they don't have to take all of these customs that the Jews had previously, the Gentiles, right? Which is what we are. Right? So maybe if you are Jewish, you still follow those things because of tradition or whatever else, and you're under that covenant. Like maybe that makes sense. I don't know, right? I don't have a full answer for that. But at least from what I understand and know from scriptures, like it definitely seems like we're not under that anymore, and that we don't have to follow that. Though rest will come in other ways for us.
I think we should still rest.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Okay. Right. Glad we're on the same page now.
Yay!
Wow. Amazing.
We did it.
If you want to check out this full episode, you can do that on patreon.com/thesnipelife. This is the best way to help us to support what we're doing here on the Better Not Easy channel. Thank you very much. Just remember that following Jesus is better not easy.